Wabarakatuh to everyone who has joined us today. As Rosebuds, we've witnessed something powerful over the years. We meet women and men who are gifted, visionary, talented. We've seen founders, creatives, CEOs, students, mothers, fathers, people building dreams and carrying entire communities on their shoulders. At the same token, we've also seen something else. Many of us have forgotten, unfortunately, how to rest. Not just to stop working, but to actually rest. Are we taking the time to breathe? Are we taking the time to pause without guilt? Are we taking the time to exist without proving? And the truth is, when rest disappears, revival disappears with it. We start rushing, we start comparing, the pressure creeps in, and then before you know it, suddenly exhaustion becomes a personality, and anxiety becomes a daily companion, and panic becomes familiar, and burnout becomes our new normal. And I'm sure you'll agree that it's destroying us quietly. So, with that said, today's session is not just a conversation, it's really a call back to ourselves. Again, I'm sure you'll agree, we want our community or communities to step into 2026 with a healthier mind, a softer heart, and a more sustainable relationship with ambition and purpose. We want to learn how to slow down, how to breathe again, and how to feel like ourselves again. Which brings us to our special guest. Today, we are joined by our dear brother, LifeOfDinoo, a content creator and speaker who focuses on community, identity, and real conversations. Brother Dino has built a space online where people feel seen, heard, and understood, especially when it comes to issues like anxiety, self-worth, burnout, and what it really means to rest. He's known for addressing generational challenges with emotional honesty, insight, and cultural awareness, and for opening up conversations that many people struggle to have in their everyday lives. Through his videos and talks, Brother Dino highlights the importance of restoring dialogue and understanding, especially between parents, youth, and elders in a world that's changing faster than our ability to catch our breath. We are so grateful he's here today to share his experience and wisdom with all of us. Thank you so much, Brother Dino. A special assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is our first time actually meeting, so it's nice to have a warm introduction from you guys.
Alhamdulillah. Are you excited, brother? Because I really am. I can't wait to get to dive into the interview, inshallah.
Let's do it. Let's do
Let's
it.
do it. Awesome. Okay. Right. Without further ado, brother, when you first started experiencing anxiety and burnout, what did that feel like, both emotionally and physically?
I think before I answer that, context is better for people that are just wondering where did it come from, right? So, my anxiety came from a caffeine overdose. Sounds pretty stupid, right? But I used to be heavy into the gym. I used to powerlift. I used to compete, and I had a caffeine overdose one time, and it led me to have a panic attack. And believe it or not, for the next year and a half, I had consistent panic attacks and anxiety. So it kind of taught me a lot, but to answer your question in terms of what it feels like physically, shortness of breath, you have this nausea feeling. Also, I became really scared of public areas. So if I would be in a mall, I would have a panic attack, which was a real interesting time in my life. And in terms of like the physical manifestations daily, I wouldn't be able to swallow sometimes. I would be very nauseous. Sometimes I would wake up and I would feel a big weight on my body. Also, death anxiety is something a lot of people do not talk about. I did have a lot of death anxiety because anxiety symptoms are very interesting because you can't put a finger on it. It's not like, oh, I ate this and it gave me a stomach ache. It isn't that correlative, right? But I noticed because I didn't know where it was coming from and what it was, I automatically assumed that all the time, every time it would happen, I would probably be on the way out. So that was typically the physical stuff that I was dealing with. Also, a lot of mental stuff. But really, being a Muslim helps a lot in this case because I always had to constantly remind myself that if I am to die, it will happen. And a lot of people experience this. I thought I was the only one that was going through this. But then when I posted it online, I've made multiple videos about this. For me, I always associate anxiety with women. I know it sounds very interesting to say, but when I got grown men DMing me, messaging me that are in their 30s, way older than me, telling me this is something I struggle with on a day to day, it then highlighted the importance of vocalizing something like this.
That's interesting. Now, I've never heard of anything like caffeine overdose. So, brother, my follow-up question to the first question is, how did you even know that it was a caffeine overdose?
Because caffeine does give you anxious symptoms, if especially in high dosages. And I'm not going to disclose a lot of information, but I used to be a caffeine addict, right? I used to just love caffeine, whether it was through energy drinks, pre-workouts, or coffee in of itself. And coincidentally, the day that it happened to me was a concoction of all three. I was hitting a personal record. As I said, I used to be really into the gym, and I remember when I had it, like it took a bit of time to set into my bloodstream, but then it gave me a really strong panic attack. As in, I genuinely thought because I didn't even recall that I had a caffeine overdose, it gave me such a strong reaction in the moment that I was hyperventilating. And even to add extra detail, my friend was driving us home and I had to get out of the car because I couldn't breathe and I was pacing up and down the road, just screaming my shahada. It was such an interesting experience. But the doctors
SubhanAllah.
did say you consumed a large amount of caffeine. And obviously, if you have a super physiological amount of caffeine, it can lead to a heart attack and you can essentially die. So I was just playing around with my life. But what happened after that was very interesting because I thought it was only in that moment, but then it stayed with me for a year. But then when I was researching into it and I was talking to like therapists and stuff, they said sometimes a traumatic event can scar your brain and it can change your neurological links in your brain, and it can actually induce panic attacks and anxiety. So it was more so PTSD than the caffeine in of itself, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yes, it does. Okay, so in terms of emotionally, then, where were you at the time of this diagnosis, and how were you feeling thereafter? Because it's interesting, as you mentioned, you got out of the car, you were pacing up and down and reciting your Shahada repeatedly. So talk us through that from an emotional standpoint, from an emotional state
As in, do you mean in the moment or just generally?
in the moment and also generally after the diagnosis.
So in the moment, I was more so hyperventilating, but after that, it really changed everything for me because I didn't really know who my old self was. I was clinging on to that version of me before, but this new version I just couldn't accept. So emotionally, for me, it was always remembering what I used to do. And as silly as it sounds now, alhamdulillah, I'm in a good position now. But in those times, I just used to be envious of people that could wake up and just go about their day and be normal, which is why we take our health for granted, right? It's like someone waking up in the morning, just going about their day was something I really envied. I was like, oh, I really wish I could do that. And that's why it took a very big toll on me emotionally. Also, to supplement this and to add to this, I actually moved countries amidst all of this. So you can imagine how many things were going on in my life at once. And that's why all the things I talk about now, most of the time came from that period. It taught me like a lot of lessons on how to regulate your emotions, your nervous system, how to essentially be or rest, as you say, so you can heal and rewire your brain eventually.
Mm. An international move is huge. It's not an easy feat to have that going on at the time of what you were experiencing. I'm sure that must not have been easy. Okay, so you speak about grieving your old self, and you mentioned how you were, what did you, it was a power lifter? Is that what you said?
Yeah. So I'll just
Awesome.
gym. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so describe just a little bit about your old self, your lifestyle then, in addition to being at the gym a lot, and then the tools that you adopted to accept this new version. And did you fight it?
Okay, so just to kind of summarize, are you asking me as in what was my old self
Yeah,
like?
let's
What
begin with
is that
that.
grief? Okay.
Yeah, let's begin
So
with your old self first.
the biggest difference I noticed, subhanAllah, is a real crazy thing, right? Is how careless we are on a day to day when we're healthy, right? I don't ever think about going out and being hit by a car. I don't ever think about traveling somewhere and not making it back home. It doesn't actually cross your mind when you're perfectly healthy. So in terms of my old self, the difference that I noticed between that version of me and my old self was how careless I was before, as in I would go to sleep, not even thinking about if I'm going to wake up tomorrow, as in I would expect it to happen as a default. But then when I was going through all of this anxiety, death anxiety, and panic attacks, it really made me super conscious of everything that I was doing on a day to day, from what I was consuming to what I was watching to who I was hanging around to where I was going. So it did make me a bit paranoid to some extent, but my old self was just purely careless. I was young, just doing things, planning super ahead. I was thinking about what I was going to do after 5 years. And then when I was going through that anxious and panic attack state, everything just became about today. My goal, and I used to write it in my journal quite a lot, was to just survive the day. I would journal about my day quite a lot. Today is, I think, the 30th of December. My goal today is to just survive today. That's it. I'm not even thinking about what's happening tomorrow because in my head, I didn't think I was going to make it that far. So it was an interesting experience to say the least.
Brother, thank you very much. As I was hearing you speak, I recall having some conversation with my own clients, and one of the things that's cropped up in similar situations as yours is sadness. How they felt sad that they went from a body like this to a body like now, and words like sadness, guilt also has come up along with feeling like they had abused their body. They didn't take care of it. Did you encounter any of those? Did you go through the sadness, the guilt, oh, I probably abused my body? Did you have those feelings, those thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a natural part of life where we regret the decisions we make. I even had an operation like 2 months ago. I had sepsis, blood infection, and I was hospitalized because of it 2 months ago. And it's like anytime I have a health event going on in my life, it really just reminds you of how careless we are on a day to day. Like we don't necessarily pay attention to these things. Sadness is a natural part of things. I do believe grieving sometimes is a natural part of life. Sometimes you reminisce your young self if you're old. You reminisce not having kids if you have kids. Sometimes it's just a part of life. But sadness did onset, but I really worked through it. And one thing I'm going to let everyone know here is never take a medication, never take a supplements, never taken any of these things. And alhamdulillah, obviously, all grace be to God. I happened to work through it. But for me, it was just more so about conquering my mind. And the thing that I always used to write about was if my brain can switch overnight and develop anxiety and panic attack symptoms and create all of these weird realities where I'm walking outside and I randomly cannot breathe, or I'm constantly thinking about dying, my brain can also reverse that. It may take longer, but it's definitely doable, which also made me aware of how complicated our brains are.
100% brother. We often say in the profession that I'm in, just as quickly one can develop a fear, a phobia, just as quickly can it be undone. Awesome. Okay, so now, brother, it sounds like one of the strategies you adopted was journaling, and that sounds like that helped you immensely. Were there any other strategies you adopted to help you with this stage?
There was a lot. Honestly, I could talk about this for hours, right? So when it comes to anxiety and panic attacks, the first thing I think that we kind of skipped over was the whole grieving your old self. I think for me, the way I reframe it to people is grieving your old self is not something you should think as a negative for me personally, right? Because a lot of people, when they consider grieving, they only think about weakness. But for me, it's about an ending of a chapter. That version of me is done, right? And for me, it's more so I focus on writing a new chapter than trying to get rid of old chapters. So when I was going through anxiety and panic attacks, I would say after like 2, 3 months, when I slightly got used to it, I really reminded myself every day that that version of me is gone. Right? I can reminisce. I can say, oh, it was a good time, whatever I used to do. But that version of me is gone. And I have to figure out what this new version of me is becoming. Also, another thing that I used to have at the top of my journal was, we pray to Allah all the time to give us strength and give us all the success in the world. But success comes with a cost. So for me, maybe that was one of the du'as I made a while back that said, make me a great person. And in the process, who knows, this version of me that you're seeing right now, had to go through that in order to come here. So the grieving part for me, it's all about perspective. I just believe if you're grieving and you're reminiscing about your old self, just don't attach to it. You can remember the good times. As I said, if you have a family and kids, you can reminisce being single and being free to do whatever you want. There's nothing negative about that. It's just accepting what less responsibilities you had. So that's the grieving part. In terms of what tools I've used, I think the one thing that was new to me that I adopted was changing my diet. See, I went deep into the research of anxiety, depression, and mental health, and there's a massive relation between your gut and your brain, right? No one ever talks about this, or I should say, people talk about it now, but back in the days, no one would ever mention, oh, you know what you eat contributes towards your mental health. And it took a lot of rewiring, consuming anti-inflammatory foods, really watching what I eat because my brain was so hyperactive and very sensitive. If I would eat bad food, I would get a panic attack. If I would eat bad food, I would feel extremely anxious. Not more so now. I had to obviously rewire my gut as well by consuming a lot of gut bacteria, all of these things. But for anyone that's listening that is going through some mental health problems, a big part of it is probably because of your gut. You know, all the inflammatory foods that you're eating, all the stuff that you may be drinking and maybe consuming is affecting your gut microbiome, which may actually trigger a lot of your mental health problems. But secondarily, to supplement it, I had to really limit all the exposures that I had. So throughout that time, I had to reduce social media consumption because, believe it or not, social media consumption from a mental perspective is one of the main drivers of mental health problems, because the more stuff you consume online, think about it. I would go online and I would just watch someone going through a hard time in life and it would make me very anxious. Oh, this person passed away. And then I would start feeling doom and gloom. Then I would watch someone talking about how they made $1 million. Then I would feel another emotion. And that fluctuation of emotions takes a toll on your brain. And this is what people do not acknowledge. Another thing that really helped at that time, now I don't really pay attention to it too much, is sleep. I do believe the greatest recovery vehicle is sleep. The more you sleep, the more you recover. It's just a natural part of life. And one of the biggest contributors I noticed was when I had a good sleeping schedule, it allowed me to control a lot of my inputs. Because think about it like this: if you're in your bed right now, or when you go to sleep and all you do is scroll, think of the addition between social media consumption whilst you're in bed and being super tired. That addition really takes a toll. So that's just some stuff. If you guys do want to make me expand on any, I definitely will. But that's just some things that helped me.
I'm so glad you mentioned sleep because my next question is about rest. So many of us, brother, feel guilty when we do rest. We feel like we should be doing more. Did you ever feel guilty resting at that time?
Yeah, to give people just generic advice regarding this, the reason why you cannot rest is because you've subscribed to hustle culture. See, when you look at it from a holistic perspective, the reason why we're always on edge is because we live in a hyper capitalistic market where it's like you have to always be doing something. Someone sitting there just reading a book is seen as unproductive nowadays. People are like, oh, you could be making money, oh, you could be doing this. So because we're all chronically online, we've adopted this mindset that I have to always be doing something. And I noticed this in pretty much everyone. Even when people are resting, I want you guys to ask yourself this question, right? When you are resting, do you actually rest, or do you go from physical work to mental labor? And what I mean by that is scrolling on social media. The worst form of rest is scrolling on social media because your brain is constantly active. You're chronically focusing on things that are online, and it does a number in your head. For me, one thing I noticed is I have what I call active rest, which is if I'm not doing actual work, I have to do something that is mildly stimulating. So some of my active rests are meeting up with my friends at a cafe shop and just having a talk, just chilling. I do have good friendships where I can call them at least once a week and we just go hang out. That's very therapeutic to me. Another one is just going on a walk. If you can go on a nice long stroll, that is a form of active rest. Social media is not resting because what happens is we're so used to being stimulated. If you're not working, you're consuming content. If you're not consuming content, you're sleeping. If you're not sleeping, you're working. And the cycle is so vicious that you end up burning out pretty quickly because you're not actually resting. So first thing I would say is unsubscribe from hustle culture. I don't believe that you should be working every day. When I just got that out of my mind, it really helped. Also, your worth isn't tied to what you do. I don't care how much money you have in your account. You are still a human being. You have an opinion. You can move, breathe, and you can actually do something in this world. So don't let numbers and materialism make you feel less of a human. And secondarily, man, actually write down what you class as rest, because I guarantee if you're on social media, that isn't rest. So I hope that helps.
It does, brother. You used a phrase I've never heard before, and goodness me, did it land chronically online. That just sums it up, right? We are chronically online. Okay, so a quick question tied into rest. Um, Not rest, active. What did you phrase it as, brother? Forgive me.
I said
Active,
active rest, active rest.
active rest. Right. So many of all of our members are women. So I don't know if you're able to answer this, but we do go through phases where we don't know who we are. And so to ask us, what is your active rest? Or even as simple as, what are your hobbies? What do you like doing? We have no idea. So to a group of people, a group of demographics like those, what advice would you give in terms of finding who they are and thereafter finding what it is that they like to do and enjoy that could be a part of their active rest?
So first thing I want to say is you will never know. You have to explore. That's what I usually advise people. But interestingly enough, everything you guys are saying, I actually talked to my sister and my mother about, right? So I don't know how this would come across, but I do believe in especially Muslim and ethnic communities, a lot of women are kind of led down this path where they're like, your whole entire purpose is just to have a family and kids. And I'm not dissuading you from having family and kids. That is what life's about. But what happens is when you get married and you have kids and now you have a family, after that learning curve where you have kids is the novelty of it, you have a family. Once that kind of dies down slightly and it becomes mundane, a lot of women go through an existential moment where they're like, what the hell am I good at? What the hell am I doing? And believe it or not, I have this conversation with my sister. Even though she's a graduate, she's had a degree before, but because she's got kids now, she always says, I don't really know what I'm doing with my life. So that is one thing. It's just understanding where that whole identity thing came from. But secondarily, for me, the advice I always give people is give yourself the grace to explore. Right? Give yourself the room to explore. Be someone that is childlike again. If you find something that you think is remotely interesting, let your curiosities let your curiosities take you there. Because when I speak to my sister, when I speak to people that I know that are in a similar age range, they are so caught up on I have to know what it is that I'm good at. But life has never been like that. If you go through academia, I think the education system is what set people up, where they tell you go from primary school to secondary school to college to university, and then you get a job and then that's it. But nobody ever teaches you about the uncertainty of life, where you have to figure out who you are. Nobody teaches you how to become yourself or how to figure yourself out. They only teach you how to just do what everyone else does. So to kind of answer your question, for anyone that's just stuck in that existential moment of what the hell am I doing with my life? The best advice I can give you is change your perspective on it. Instead of thinking about that in a negative way, why don't you just tell yourself, there's so much things for me to explore. Let me just start with something and give myself the grace to be bad so I can grow into becoming someone that is competent.
I love that, brother. Now I'm going to hone in a little bit more. There are some people, mothers primarily, they've lost the understanding of what grace even means because as mums, as wives, we are selfless. We give and we give to the point of depletion. What does that grace even look like? What does it sound like?
That's actually a very good question. I think instead of focusing on how to give yourself relief, you need to ask yourself, what have you put yourself through in the first place? So, a lot of ethnic people or religious people, like for example, my mum does not know what rest is. I can wholeheartedly tell you, she could have nothing going on. She's going to find something to do. So one thing I advise my mum is to explore, why does she have this need to always be doing something? Why do you always have this need? Like, something, she'll look at the corner of the room and she'll be like, oh, there's dust there. Let me clean it. I'm like, you don't have anything to do. Why don't you just relax? So it's more so about understanding where this compulsion has come from. And when you kind of dig down and you break yourself down, it really comes from tying it to your self-worth. It kind of goes back to what we spoke about earlier, where you feel like if you're not doing something, you're not worth anything. If someone's not asking you to help them with something, you're not worth anything. So for anyone that's listening, I guess it can be practical and impractical at the same time, but really writing down what is it that you force yourself to do all the time? Where do these compulsions come from? And then the grace just comes from giving yourself that compassion every time where you're like, okay, I deserve this rest. You know, also when you say rest, you have to define what rest looks like for you. What do you want to do when you rest? It's very difficult to teach someone this, but it comes from identifying what it costs you. Because I notice a lot of people complain about not resting, but when they are given opportunities to rest, they feel guilty. But that guilty feeling is something you need to constantly remind yourself that it isn't guilt. It's just you thinking that you're not worth anything if you're not resting, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Perfect. So, brother, again, forgive me because I know I'm spending quite a bit of time on this. I want to go a little bit deeper again. So there are, and this happens to predominantly women. However, the men, the brothers, aren't unknown for ignoring this side of things. So when it comes to finding about ourselves, some of us, we just find it too uncomfortable. We don't want to even go there. For example, I'll use journaling as a case in point. For some of us, when we journal, the truth comes out. It's there in black and white. It's a hard reality. So we shy away from using tools and strategies to even journal because once it's written down, you can't undo it. And the reality is there and it shakes us up. We get scared. So, advice to those people where they come across a strategy, but they don't want to use it because they fear what might come out, and what might come out is the truth. What advice do you give to those people?
That's a very interesting, loaded question. Sometimes I play this activity with people, which is always write down what the worst case scenario is. For me, my whole life ethos most times is write down what the worst case scenario is of something and then sit with it. If you feel like it won't kill you or it won't ruin you, you kind of just have to move through it. But I know in all of these cases, it's never a one trick. It's never a hack. It's a continuation of iterations, which is, you have to try, then become uncomfortable, then you go back. Then you try again, you become a little bit more uncomfortable, then you go back. I think people are just not willing to try long enough. They really need to get their minds out of this idea that it's a one shoe fits all. Oh, Dino's gonna give you one hack that's gonna solve all of your problems. Not really. It can start with, becoming aware of the things you say to yourself, becoming aware of the things that you avoid. Awareness is 50% of the solution. So if you become aware of what you avoid, let's say, for example, someone says something to you and then you get triggered. Becoming aware that you get triggered is 50% of the problem. And the other part is just how can you give yourself that grace to go by it? So to answer your question, for anyone that is trying to find ways to navigate around this, best advice I can give you is to just become aware of what you do to put yourself in that situation. So with my mother, I always tell her, if you complain about being tired all the time and not having any rest, but the moment you are resting, you have to find something to do. You have to dig deep. Like, where does that compulsion to do things come from? And as I said, we've had many conversations and it boils down to the self-worth thing. So I'm not going to sit here and give you guys a one shoe fits all, one hack, because I think that's a disservice. That doesn't exist in this world. It's just more so becoming aware of what a lack of rest has costed you, why you don't rest, and then what rest looks like to you, and then how can you set those boundaries. I guess a good conversation to have is setting those boundaries up, because if you're someone that's seen as a machine, I see a lot of unfortunately, a lot of ethnic women and religious women, or Muslim women, I should say, or especially old school ones, are seen as machines. Like, no one actually respects them as a human, which is very sad to say sometimes because they're constantly on go. They've set themselves up. Do not get me wrong. They set that tone. But whenever that person now wants to rest, sometimes people expect things from you and you just feel like, oh, I cannot rest even if I wanted to. So it's just more so about part of giving yourself that grace is allowing yourself to state your boundary and say, hey guys, today I'm not doing anything. You know, you guys can serve yourself, you guys can make the food today, and then today's just my day. And then I feel like if you kind of incorporate those, if it isn't weekly, bi-weekly, if it isn't bi-weekly, maybe monthly, you're slowly teaching your nervous system that, you know, relaxing is not that bad, but also have it defined. What does relaxation look like to you? What is it that you want to do? Start developing that childlike ability again.
Love that, brother. Thank you. This question again, some of these questions, forgive me, they do pop in my head as I'm interviewing you. Can we discuss the topic of burnout, please? What is burnout? Did you experience burnout? And what advice would you give to those who have or currently are experiencing burnout?
So I find burnout very interesting. So I don't have an actual definition for burnout, but I'll tell you from my perspective, right? I used to think burnout was just exertion, right? You do things, you work on something, and then you just burn out. But then I realized sometimes burnout for me is doing things and not seeing the fruits of my labor. So it's like a bottomless pit. So for example, if I work on a business every day, 7 days a week, and it makes me money every day, I don't think I'll be burnt out. And there's a separation for me, I guess. Let me actually make this distinction. There's genuine burnout, as in you physically exerted yourself to the point where you can't, like running maybe 100 kilometers. You can't do that physically, right? But for a lot of people, the mental burnout comes from doing things, A, that is purposeless, B, you don't really see the fruits of your labor. So you don't even know if you're in the right vehicle. There's a lot of stresses that come with it. So I cannot give you guys a definition for burnout, but for me, I notice I burn out when I'm doing things and I'm not seeing results from it. And in that case, the way I deal with burnout is, as I said, scheduling active rest days. I know that I'm not going to be working 7 days a week, and that is okay. Also, another thing that I forgot to mention is when I was sick, so I had sepsis, blood infection, and it came from, so I do grappling, and I had a cut on my arm. It became infected, had an abscess, led to a sepsis. It was just a whole crazy situation. And I'm a workaholic. So 7 days a week, I'm pretty much on my computer. And it was only because I was leading up to a launch of something. And subhanAllah, just like that, I had a fever for 2 weeks. I was bedbound. And again, it reminded me that rest is okay. I was fighting resting because I kept telling myself I have to do work. I'll be sitting on my computer and I'll just have a crazy migraine and a fever. And then it eventually led me to burnout. And I realized I have to take this rest. So to answer your question, burnout for me is either misalignment with you're not really doing something that's purposeful to you. So you're just putting in energy where you're not seeing anything in return. Or if you are genuinely physically exerted, you need to really schedule in those active rest days. And when you do rest, do things that nurture you, not just suppress and distract you. As I said, social media isn't a way to rest. I believe resting should be nurturing, even if that means going to a class in the mosque and just, you know, relaxing with people, going out for a coffee if you can, going for a walk. But as I said, burnout, to summarize, is you may not have a clarity in your goals, but you're exerting yourself to the point where you can't see where the end goal is, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned social media because I will go back to one of our questions. So, social media often makes us feel behind or not enough. How do you manage comparison and pressure to always, quote, do?
Yeah, I think young people go through that a lot more than older people. First thing I would actually advise people is change your digital diet. See, a lot of people take extreme measures. So when it comes to, I guess, get like going away from social media, you delete all your apps, you block everyone. But I just believe that's an extreme measure. For me, I created my digital diet, which means I actually control what it is that I watch. I carefully pick who I follow on social media. I click not interested on a lot of things because that comparison is most times a lack of self-worth. And there's an interesting quote actually, which is comparison isn't the thief of joy. A lot of people love throwing that around. Comparison is the thief of joy only if you negatively reference yourself based on that comparison. So you can actually watch someone and say, I really like what they're doing. I'm inspired. I'm going to put in some work. Or you can look at someone and say, oh, I don't know how they do it. They're way better than me. I'm useless. I have no hope in this world. So it is definitely relative. But in terms of the whole social media landscape, I do believe that you need to really watch what you consume, because social media is the wild west now. And I don't know if you guys deal with this, but let alone materialism, nowadays you're seeing people posting their relationships, and then if their relationships break down, they're coming on the internet and they're telling you against marriage, and they're talking to you against men and women. And you see how this men and women are clashing heads all the time. Now more than ever, it is mandatory to really create what you watch, and also understand, right? You don't know people's full stories. You're watching someone's highlight reel. So when you watch me on the internet, you don't know my story. You don't know how much money is in my account. You don't know what my family's like. You don't know what my mental health is like, but you know your full story. So the reason why comparison is very negative is you know your whole story, you know your inadequacies, you know your shortcomings, you know the sins you do, you know all the failures you've had. But then when you're looking at someone like me, you may think to yourself, oh my God, he's so amazing, he's well spoken, he seems to be doing, you don't know me, right? And that's what I always remind myself. It's not as good as it seems. That's it.
Fantastic. So, brother, imagine that this question was coming from a Gen Z. What's the generation after? Is it Alpha? I forget. But anyway, let's target the Gen Zs. Forgive me if there are any Gen Zs in the audience.
Yeah.
So the same question. Imagine I'm a Gen Z. How would you tailor your response? Would you even tailor your response?
I would definitely tailor my response, because someone like yourself would have a lot more agency over themselves because you've got a reference point. So I'm 27 years of age, by the way, in case any of you guys wonder. And if I go 10 years ago, I was about 17. 17 is pretty much most of the young kids nowadays. But 10 years ago, social media was a weird space where Instagram was just pictures only. There was Twitter, but I never really used to use Twitter like that. And social media had the end point. As in, if any of you guys were avid users of Twitter or even Instagram, you swipe, and then there will be a point where you swipe, and then there's nothing more. There's nothing more to see, which basically reminded you that, oh, I need to get a life. I need to go outside and touch some grass. But now social media has become a bottomless pit where you can constantly be scrolling all day, and nothing would literally change. And that's why the advice I give to young people is, instead of trying to go through drastic measures of, deleting apps and, completely disappearing from the world, pick up more hobbies. My way to combat this, if I was 18 years old all over again, is if I can afford it, I'll do it. But if I can't, I'll tell my parents, hey, could you sign me up to this martial arts club? The more you root yourself in real life, the more reference points you have. The more reference points you have, the more life experience you get. The more life experience you have, when you're on the internet and you're seeing someone talking about nonsense, oh, all women are evil. Someone would say that on the internet. If I have no life experience, I may think to myself, oh, that may be true. If I've experienced a woman, maybe in my sister, or maybe I'm married or something, I'm then going to think to myself, oh, but my partner's not evil. Oh, but my friend's not evil. And then it changes your perspective. The problem young people have nowadays is they've got no reference points. So if you say something to them on the internet, they don't know what to reference it with. So they take it as is. So my advice to them, if there's anyone here that is in the Gen Z group, I am as well, by the way, but I did unsubscribe a very long time ago. I don't relate. But the advice I give to them is, quite literally, try to engross yourself in real life. Find third spaces. I guess you guys can relate to this, but one of the sad realities is there isn't a lot of third spaces. Even when I tell kids to join martial arts club, what if he doesn't? What else is there? Join a chess club. What if I don't like chess? There isn't a communal area where people can just come and just chill. And I think that's what we've lost over the last couple of years. But try to ground yourself as much as you can, guys.
Brother, just to clarify, what exactly is a third space?
Okay, so a third space, the concept has just been popularized by social media, but a third space basically means your home is your first space, your work is your second space. You need a third space. So, for example, my
Mm.
dad loves to go to the mosque, right? That's his thing. His social club is the mosque. So, his third space is the mosque. Your third space may be an office where you hang out with your friends, like the Rosebuds. That might be your third space where you can express yourself, you can talk to people. And a lot of kids don't have third spaces. They don't know where to go outside of home and work. So they just stay at home and they're on the internet chronically online.
Understood. Thank you so much. Okay, so my next question, and I think I'm going to continue on this comparison and the pressure to always do. I'm assuming, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Do you work with many Gen Zs? Are Gen Zs your clients, or are they typically older?
Varies, but to be fair, because of the majority who consume my content, it would obviously be Gen Z. But I've worked with all kinds of people. Typically, if I were to give you a range, it would be between 18 and 33, 35, if we kind
Mm.
of push it that far. Yeah.
And so, regarding the Gen Zs, do you find them more to compare when it comes to social media? Do you find them to be the ones versus the other age groups, other generations to who feel the pressure to always do?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Quite simply, is because Gen Z don't have an identity. Their identity was formed by social media. So that's the reality. For someone like yourselves, or for anyone that's in like my age and above, right? You at least you had a chance to form your identity. You had a chance to experience. I remember even 10 years ago, something as small as calling my friend, going on a bike ride, and going and getting chicken and chips was an activity. That was a thing. Nowadays, I notice a common trend after speaking to a lot of kids. They feel like they have to do something so dopamine inducing, where something as small as going to the shop and just getting food and sitting is like, oh, that's a bit boring. I don't want to do that. So that's a problem. So what I noticed with most kids is they don't have an identity. Their identity is the internet. So when you introduce something else to them, they don't want to dissociate because this is their comfort zone.
That makes so much sense. So, coming back to the third space, do you think a third space will nurture and foster an identity specifically for our Gen Z demographic?
Yeah, and I've seen it in real life. You know, one thing I'm a deep empath when it comes to young boys, especially because one thing I'm very vocal about is men are the losers of this generation. A lot of people kind of pit women and men against each other, and I'll tell you simply why. One thing I've noticed: men lack emotional regulation. Men have zero emotional intelligence. I'm talking about the younger generation, right? The older generation weren't that great, but imagine this generation. And I noticed men, because they don't know how to regulate themselves, they are the ultimate losers. At least with women, to some extent, they can go to their friend and talk about, oh, hey, man, I feel depressed. I'm a bit sad, man. Come give me a hug. What is the equivalent for a man? Right? No one talks about this. And that's why I noticed with young kids, these third spaces really help because deep down, they're still miskeens. They're still innocent kids. And I try to see them as kids because they come to me, trying to act all tough and they're like, yo, Dino, yeah, love what you do, bro. But then when I talk to them, I can see the inner child of them coming out where they're like, oh, I'm confused. I don't know how to stop this habit. I'm just stuck. I feel depressed a bit. And when you talk to them, you end up realizing that third spaces are so much more important than anything else out there because kids don't need online interactions. They need real life interactions. They need someone to talk to and say, hey, this is the problem I have. What do you think? Because everything's so digitized now, they only exist on the internet. There's a lot of young boys now that stay at home. So I went to a mental health convention. Apologies, I'm talking too much, right? I went to a mental health convention and a woman was basically telling me how there's been obviously an increase of young kids being admitted to mental health facilities. And some of them, you would be surprised. There are people that have stayed at home consecutively for months on end, right? There have been people that have not left their homes for 2 months, by the way. No one talks about this. What the hell keeps someone indoors for 2 months? How, does that, for me, it's unless I'm in prison, guys, right? I don't ever think about a situation where I'll be at home for 2 months. It just doesn't make sense. Why? When you break it down, it's because their identity is online. They don't even know what happens outside. They go outside and it's as if the air, the oxygen gives them social anxiety. They go straight back indoors. So the point I'm making is we've got such a big problem in society now. And unfortunately, we're just focusing on the wrong things when this generation that apparently was supposed to, take over and lead things is the ones that have lost in the process.
Subhanallah, brother, the struggle is real. So, hearing you speak, I'm now thinking of the parents who are currently online with us and that will watch this interview on YouTube. What advice would you give to the parents of the Gen Zs who are spending a month, 2 months at a time stuck at home?
I actually make a lot of content pertaining to parents because one thing I noticed is I like to tackle things from two parts. One of the reasons why children isolate themselves is because parents have refused to understand them. So a parent's version of understanding is I tell you to do something, you have to do it. If you don't do it, you're disrespecting me. Therefore, you have no grounds to stand on, which is such a flawed mechanism because parents do not realize that kids see them as superheroes. And the day they stop seeing them as a superhero is the day the parent stops listening to the kid. So I'll give you an example. This is like a popular example I discuss all the time. If your child comes to you today, it may annoy you a bit, right? But let's say if your child comes to you today and says, "Mom, today one of my friends bought a vape pen to school, and I smoked the vape pen, and I felt a bit of a headache, but I don't know what it was, Mom. What was it?" Is an extreme example, but here's where parents lose their kids. The parent, instead of asking them, "Oh, why did you do it in the first place?" What do they do? I don't even have to explain to you guys. They just what scold them. What's wrong with you? That's haram. Why are you doing that? Oh my god. They just start panicking. Kids don't see logic, they see emotions. Parents need to really download this, by the way, right? Kids only download emotions. They don't see logic. They don't know what logic you're trying or what hikmah you're trying to make them see. They just see, oh, my parents shouting at me, my mom's screaming at me, my mom doesn't really like what I did. She's not happy with me. I become emotional. And what ends up happening is I've spoken to a lot of parents where they have this one liner, which is, my kid doesn't listen to me. He values his friends a lot more. But whenever I ask them, do you listen to your child? Of course, their ego is going to kick in and they're going to say, yeah, I do listen to my child. But do you really? See, here's the thing. And this is something I try to preach to people, which is problems are inevitable. What you do when there's a problem defines everything. So if your kid comes home today and says, oh, I kissed a girl, if he's a boy, or, a girl says, I kissed a guy, and it just comes out. One of the biggest difficulties as parents is having dialogues in that house, but it doesn't mean acceptance, right? Just because I discuss it with my child doesn't mean I'm accepting the behavior. You need to learn to separate it. So the point I'm making is that's the first problem where kids feel like their parents just don't understand them. I cannot communicate with my mom. I cannot communicate with my dad. And then to supplement that, because there's no role models outside, because there's no mentors and no one to actually rein in and take in the child and say, oh, hey, I understand that you're smoking now, but what actually makes you smoke? What other good things are you doing? Focus on the positives. Try to lead them, away from that rather than focusing on the problem. And kids then end up realizing the only respite and the only, I guess, relief I have is the internet. But the internet's the Wild West. I keep telling you guys, the internet is full of so much drama, so many opinions, and then it confuses the child and then they have nowhere to go. So now we're at a stage which I called learned helplessness, which is a interesting phenomenon where people don't even want to try anymore because they are constantly predicting the outcome. So I hope that kind of gave you some insight.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Wow. For the sake of time and brevity, I'll refuse asking any more ad-lib type questions because I could ask you over and over. Lots of questions popping in my head. Right. A quick message to the audience. If anybody has any questions for our brother, please write them in the chat. We are coming close to an hour. So, brother, um, I want to bring it back to the anxiety and panic. Now, at some stage in our lives, we've all experienced anxiety and panic, and it has made us feel alone. What would you say to someone who feels isolated right now?
That's a real good question. Um, the first thing I noticed, and also one thing I failed to mention, apologies. When it comes to anxiety, the hardest thing about anxiety is that nobody understands it unless they've experienced it. So I had this interesting situation that I always reference where my friend looked at me one day whilst I was having a panic attack and he said, bro, you look normal. Right. And something so small, something so simple has stuck with me forever. The reason being is, people don't understand what anxiety is to start with, which is why the byproduct of it is loneliness. And so for me, I guess if you're someone going through this and you're lonely, try to, I guess, explain it to the people around you. So at least there's some shared experience. Because I know suffering by yourself is not fun. I used to be in my room most of the time. And another thing is finding online forums where people have actually healed, which is why me speaking about it, believe it or not, has helped alleviate so many people's stress, so many people's anxiety and loneliness went away simply because I opened my mouth because they're like, oh, I'm not the only one. So I think in terms of from a general perspective, it's about the normalization of these conversations. I know in ethnic and religious communities, mental health is such a foreign concept. And, oh, if you go through mental health, it's probably because you're not praying. And all of these things are what kind of lead to people suffering in silence. So let's try to make it a more common conversation. If you are going through this, try to find someone that you can anchor to, man. Just speak to someone about what you're going through. But most importantly, man, connection to Allah is the best. For me, I don't reference this quite a lot, but having faith that whatever's written for me is written. Just help me push that extra day. And the whole death anxiety thing is, if I'm meant to die, I'm meant to die. I can't do anything about it. You can plan, but Allah's plan's the best. So I hope that helped within reason. I could talk about this for a long time, but it will go over time.
Alhamdulillah, it does. Okay, so in terms of the parents, how can parents foster and nurture a safe space for our children, boys particularly, to come to us and confide, to open up, and to share feelings such as anxiety? What can the parents do?
So question I want to ask you is, right, is this for boys or girls? Because one thing I learned, and maybe parents need to take this on board. The way you train or have a conversation with a boy is completely different to the way you have a conversation with a girl, right? So, to actually answer both, with women, you can actually sit down with them and say, oh, hey, talk to me, what are you going through? And I'm here for you. Women are very receptive to that. With men, no one talks about it. As I said, men are the losers of this generation. With men, you need to associate it with the activity. So I'm someone that is very grassrooted, like in London. Right now, I'm not in London, right? But when I'm in London, the thing I noticed that works with men and boys quite a lot is leading them out with an activity, but the byproduct is we have a conversation. So, for example, if I'm a parent and I want to get my son to talk to me, one of those days I'm going to get him out of the house and we're going to go somewhere. We're just going to go on a drive. We're going to get some food. He's probably going to say, Mom, why do I need? Just come. We're going to have fun. Right? No expectations. Whilst you're driving and you're taking them somewhere, what I noticed is men are very receptive to things when there's another thing going on. Another example is like youth clubs. The reason why youth clubs work so well is if I invite you to a youth club and I'm like, oh, there's pizza and there's a PlayStation and you can play games and you can eat pizza, that opens up the conversation. But with men, they're not very receptive when it's, oh, let's sit down and let's have a conversation. They're very closed up. So if you're a parent and you really want to, I guess, have a conversation with your child, the best time is outside the home, but secondarily is do not expect them to open up so soon. The last thing I want to mention, actually, before I let this go, is from my own experience, as someone who used to be a rebellious child, how can you expect your child to open up when you don't open up to them? I think I'm not even going to say anything after that. I just want you guys to think about it because for me, opening up is a two-way street. If I don't know much about my parents, and especially a lot of ethnic religious parents are not really super emotionally regulated because they come from back home, survival mindsets. If you don't open up to your child, how do you expect your child to open up to you? That's just a thought I want to put out there.
I love that, brother. Thank you so, so much. Okay, are we ready for our quick fire questions?
Go for it.
Whatever comes to mind, brother, inshallah. All right, Bismillah. What is one habit every Muslim should start tonight before going to bed?
Reflecting and journaling.
Mm. The most dangerous trap for the youth in 2025.
Being chronically online, short form content.
One surah or ayah that always gives you strength when things get tough.
Mine's gone blank.
Appreciate your honesty. In one word, what is the secret to a heart that is at peace?
Oh, was that the question?
Yes.
Um, can you repeat that again? I thought you were going
Uh,
to say something else.
no worries. In one word, what is the secret to a heart that is at peace?
Connection.
Nice. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice in 5 seconds, what would it be?
Not everyone's going to support you.
Mm. And the last one, what is the biggest misconception people have about living for the akhirah?
That you're going to have enough time on this planet to repent.
So true. I love that. Thank you so, so much, brother. I really appreciate your time. This hour has gone so, so quickly. I had to rein myself in because I had multiple questions coming in. My neurons were firing. Inshallah, we can save them for another day. I am mindful we do have questions in the chat, so bear with me, brother, as I do a quick scroll through. Um, where does it begin? Here we go. Right. A quick way to reconnect to your teenage son, please.
I think I answered that with the anxiety thing. So when it comes to reconnecting with your teenage son, is actually trying to get him to do activities with you or to have outings. The home is not a good place to have conversations because the home may have trauma associated to it. The home may have an eeriness of isolation. I know this, for example, my family came over to the UAE to visit me about 2, 3 weeks ago. And I've had conversations with my siblings just recently that I've never had with them. Why? Because we're in a different environment. So new environments breed better conversations. Let's just stick to that.
Awesome. Thank you. This is coming from a sister. How can we involve dads in tarbiyah and communication?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that. How can we involve?
How can we involve dads in tarbiyah and communication?
I'm not too sure what they're referencing. How can we involve dads in tarbiyah and communication?
Sister Hafsa, if you're able to expound upon that question, maybe we can come back to it. Next question. How do you know if you are still healing or grieving the old you?
Progress. And one thing I want you guys to be aware of is healing is quiet, healing is boring. Healing isn't aesthetic. Social media makes you feel like healing is, buying yourself a new bag, getting a matcha, going on these therapeutic shop runs. Healing is very boring. It's very quiet. It's, maybe not sending that text message to that person or maybe keeping your promises and refraining from environments that once induce trauma within you. So always be aware that healing is a very long process that is boring. You're going to have to get used to quietly healing, if that makes sense.
Awesome, thank you. Sister Hafsa, I don't know if you're still here. So let's read the question again. How can we involve dads in tarbiyah and communication? I'm only assuming that what the sister means is how can we get the dads involved with a bit of, she just, no, okay. How can she get the dads involved with communicating with the children, connection with the children, giving them tarbiyah?
It is very, very difficult because it's very hard to change a human that is more so on the same level as you. Like you can influence your child because deep down your child still respects you. But if the dad isn't necessarily involved, I would say just be the proactive one that gets the family out of the house. As I said, new environments, better conversations, and it depends on what your conversation with your partner is like in the first place. The way you communicate with your partner will kind of give you an inkling on the relationship he'll have with the child in terms of communication. So it is very context based, in my opinion.
Fantastic. I think that was the last of the questions. Let me have a quick look. Oh no, how can you control the anger and anxiety with others that comes from not being healed?
It's very interesting because you need to become aware of your triggers. See, the reaction is just the surface level. What you're, I guess, overcoming or trying to suppress is a different thing. So, for example, if you get angry about something, if you always get triggered about something, instead of trying to control the action, what is it that you are overcompensating for? That's a better way to deal with it. And then pausing. If you're aware, like, for example, if someone asks me, what am I doing with my life? And I'm not doing much, and it's a very sensitive conversation. If I react every time, my purpose isn't to control that reaction. It is what does someone asking me what I'm doing with my life show within me? What does it mean inside me? And it could be, a lack of self-worth, a lack of self-esteem. And then when you acknowledge that problem, which comes from facing yourself in the mirror, you can then take a pause, just pause. Then the moment someone says something to you, pause. I guarantee if you give it like 2, 3 seconds, you won't have that impulseness. It's just about breaking that cycle. It's very automatic.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you, brother. I don't think there are any other questions. However, I have asked in the chat for a quick fire round to our listeners. What are your key takeaways? And as they come in, inshallah, I'm hoping that Sister Aisha will share your social media handles. So brother, remind us you are on Instagram. Are you on TikTok and YouTube as well?
Yeah, I'm on. I would say if you really want better insight, it's better to listen to my podcast because I do talk about a lot of things in detail on my podcast. It's all on my Instagram. If you go on my Instagram, you click my bio, you would see my podcast link. I'm on TikTok. I'm on YouTube. I've also got a Substack. which is a written blogging app. So yeah, I'm everywhere.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you, Sister Aisha. We haven't had any quick fire takeaways, and that's okay. Brother, I want to thank you again so much for your time. We appreciate you. We know you are super busy, and may Allah reward your work in abundance in Deen, Dunya, and Akhirah, because you are holding real, raw conversations that are much needed, and as unfortunately many parents do shy away from. It's not easy times, what with social media, Gen Z, loss of identity. So really, may Allah make it heavy on your scales. I mean, any
Um,
last many comments, statements, questions, brother, from yourself?
um, I love everyone. Let's end on the positive.
Awesome. I love it. One key takeaway from me is the hadith that, and I paraphrase, take benefit of five before five, your youth before your old age, your health before your sickness, your wealth before your poverty, your free time before your preoccupation and work, and your life before your death. Once again, thank you so much, dear brother. Take care, and inshallah, we will have you again on our Rosebuds platform, inshallah.
Inshallah.